Mitch Marner is absolutely dazzling right now. And we got some trades that are starting to percolate up in the NHL. So we're going to take a look at our top trade bait boards for the Maple Leafs. Then we'll play a little bit of cosine, no sign. That's what we got here today on Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother from TSN's Overdrive. Joining me also today is my permanent co-host. It's Dave Morrissey from Sportsnet, a writer for the NHLPA. And just a reminder that this is a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe to the show for free wherever you get your podcasts, and also you can check us out on YouTube now, so you can check out the video form of this podcast and look at our questionable mugs. So you can do that on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. Going to be a fun show today. I'm actually looking forward to it. A little bit of, it's an off day coming off of a game, but then there's still one more day to go before we got to preview the game against Pittsburgh. So we could actually just sit here, have a discussion, talk about what's going on. So I feel like we can have a discussion about what we're seeing from Mitch Marner right now and just how amazing he's been, and the fact that he's just playing hockey at possibly the highest level that we've ever seen from this guy. So we'll have that discussion. We got our top 5 power rankings, or trade bait board, trade lists, however you want to call it. We've got 5 guys each who we think are some of the guys who the Maple Leafs should go after. So we're going to go through and we'll tell you that, and then we'll play some cosine, no sign as well. So fun show, but let's get right to it. Mitch Marner. Coming off that Seattle game, it's, clearly the best player on the ice in that game. Finished the game with 3 points and had that dazzling assist, just leaving that puck wide open for David Kampf to pounce on. And, it's getting a lot of love right now as one of the prettier plays that we've seen all season from the Maple Leafs. And I think it very well might be, to be quite honest with you. But What is a very encouraging sign, if you're a Leafs fan, is the way that Mitch Marner is playing. If he can play like this the rest of the year, if he can remain confident like this, I think that this playoff demon that he has in his head, where he's not scored in 18 straight games, that's going to go to the wayside this year. The way that he's scoring goals, I think, is really important to believing that this year could be different for Toronto, could be different for Mitch Marner, and could end up being a different outcome for the team.
Yeah, this is a Mitch Marner season I don't think many of us expected, really. I mean, a lot of people were down on Mitch Marner after the way that season ended, and him and Austin Matthews took a lot of heat for the way that series went against the Canadiens, and I think he took it to heart. He always does, and I don't think it was any different from any other year, but I just think he's found something in his game that he's been trying to unlock, and now he's got that confidence to know that he can do it. He's doing it the right way too, right? He's going to the net. He's setting up guys with moves that you don't expect guys to make. Especially we talked about it. With the goal, he's the setup on David Kampf's goal. Like Mitch Marner is clearly in the right element right now. I think if he's got this, I believe that he can play this way. It should translate well into the playoffs. Let's see if it can continue with some tougher opponents. I think it can, based on the stretch. It's not just one stretch. This is not just like one period he's doing it. He's been doing it ever since he had that slow start to the season.
Yeah, like he's been really, ever since he got back from, he had the injury, then he got back from COVID, and there's been the joke that COVID gave him superpowers because he's got 11 goals, 11 assists in 11 games, 22 points in his last 11 games for this guy. And, you said it best. The way that he's scoring, I think, is what's most encouraging, because if we know anything about the playoffs and playoff hockey, the goals are scored in and around the net. Like that's just where they're going to be scored from. You're going to have to get greasy garbage goals. They don't give you much. They don't give you any time and space to make pretty plays. So, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to go attack the net, pounce on rebounds. And that's literally how this guy is scoring a lot of his goals. Like, go back and just look at the compilation of goals that he scored over the course of this 11-game streak that he's on. And that's exactly how he's doing it from in tight. He's pouncing on rebounds and just firing them away. And then now the fact that he's also included the threat as a shot, he's opening up space for other guys. It's allowing Michael Bunting to get opportunities. On the power play, he's become a threat to score now after going, 100 straight games without a power play goal. Now all of a sudden you got the power play that's just clicking because they don't know who the shot's going to come from. So they got to be honest on every single one. And that's just opening up so much space for guys like Matthews, guys like William Nylander, up at the point. Morgan Riley's been able to find some space to get pucks on net, and then they're pouncing on those rebounds. Once that happens, they were 2 for 2 the other night. They're operating at a 30% clip this season, 33% since the new year. So every third power play, they're scoring a goal. And that's that's how I think you're going to find success in the playoffs. If you can just limit your mistakes, and then when you get those power plays, you get those man advantages, you got to score, you got to attack, you got to take advantage of those. And if you couple that with the success of Mitch Marner and his scoring touch and the fact that he's going into those dirty, greasy areas, I think is just, if he continues to do this the rest of the season, that bodes really, really well for Leafs Nation. Mitch Marner, a confident Mitch Marner, is a dangerous thing for the league. A dangerous thing.
Yeah, and look, we've been waiting for this Mitch Marner. I think this is the Mitch Marner that the Leafs signed to that massive deal. Like people were really down.
Haven't heard anybody complaining about his salary recently, have you?
No, I have. I mean, look, you'll always find one or two people that'll forever hate that deal. But
you've got the wake me up in the playoffs crew, right? Like, you're always going to have the wake me up in the playoffs crew. But I think the point that we're trying to get across here is there are signs this season that were not there in the past that do make me believe that things can be different, that the process is a little different this year, which could lead to better results. That, I think, is basically the crux of what we're trying to get at here.
Yeah, and I think really when you look at how he's how this season has gone for him, he's gone through the adversity that usually he hasn't been able to overcome, right? There's always times where you hear him say that he struggled with certain things. I think the fact that he went through the struggles early and was able to overcome them should benefit him more, because in the past, I don't think he's ever really dealt with that adversity early on and shown that he can get over it. He's always just been on a good streak, or he's always had solid play in the regular season. And at the same time, a lot of people would say, it's because he's playing with Austin Matthews. Well, he's also doing a lot of things on his own, right? He's showing that playing with Austin Matthews helped.
Matthews isn't killing penalties. Austin Matthews didn't help him make that brilliant pass to David Kampf. That was him. That was his genius mind who was doing that stuff. So, yes, Austin Matthews is an all-world player, a top 3 to 5 player in the NHL, in the world, but that doesn't mean that Mitch Marner can't be top 10, 15 himself. And that's what people seem to forget. It's like, it's not it doesn't necessarily have to always be a Batman Robin situation. 2 Batmans, you know what I mean? It was like Johnny Tays and Patrick Kane. This is what this reminds me of is, back when the Chicago Blackhawks were winning their cups, they had Jonathan Tays and they had Patrick Kane. And that's like those 2 Batmans at the time. And this seems to be what the Leafs have right now in Mitch Marner and in Austin Matthews. And in Matthews' case, I think he's by far better than Jonathan Tays has ever been. And Mitch Marner, I'm not going to quite say that he's, become Patrick Kane, but boy, the way he's playing right now over the last 11 games, those are the type of stretches that make you say, yeah, that's his ceiling. That's the caliber of player that he could possibly be. So, and those guys found success. They did. And I think the Leafs should find some success this season. Let's at least hope. Let's at least hope. But we like the process. We like the process. Hopefully, the results do follow. All right. Trade season is upon us. So we will go through our top 5 trade lists, guys who we want the Maple Leafs to go out and get. Then we'll also play some cosine, no sign. But before we do, why don't we hear a word from today's show sponsor, Dave?
Yeah, let's talk about our boys at Built Bar. This time of the year, the New Year's resolutions, a little hard to keep up with them. Especially Super Bowl time. I'm sure we all had that lovely feast. So maybe now we got to get back on track with our routine. So how about we enjoy a nice Built Bar? The low-calorie, high-protein, replace your candy bar type of treat. All right, so make sure you go to BuiltBar.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. So use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano. Alongside me, we got Dave Morisuti. We are your host of Locked On Leafs, and this is a daily Maple Leafs podcast. So make sure that if you enjoy what we're talking about today, go ahead, hit subscribe, maybe leave a comment as well if you would like. If you're on YouTube, a comment below, maybe your thoughts on Mitch Marner's hot play of late. And certainly we're going to want your list for what we're talking about next. And that is our trade deadline wish list. So we got kind of our top 5 players that we want the Maple Leafs to go out and try and get at the deadline. I assume they're not going to go and get all of these players, but if they can land one of them, I think it would make you and I a happier camper than we are today. Why don't you start with, go ahead, you start with your list, and then I'll go with my list afterwards. So your top 5, we'll start with 5, go through to 1.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth with the ranking because it's like who do you want the Leafs to get versus what they should get, right? So number 5, some people might disagree with this one, but I think Damon Severson is someone that can really help the Leafs. He didn't exactly play well when the Leafs went up against the New Jersey Devils, but I
He
don't
was
think
awful in that series. He was awful in that series, but
he was not good, but the New Jersey Devils weren't exactly good at all. So this is one where you have to say, okay, he's had the body of work, during his time in New Jersey. I think people also just look at the Devils as a bad team, but you have to also look at what Damon Severson provides. I think he's the type of guy that can help Jake Muzzin this season, and then down the road, if let's say the Leafs decide that Jake Muzzin isn't the guy that they want to keep along, Rasmus Sandin has a veteran guy that he can work with, and I would have a lot more confidence in a Damon Severson, for next year than I would with the Justin Hall working with the Rasmus Sandin. So the reason why I like Severson, it's not a rental. He is a guy that does have some term, and I think he's an RFA at the end of his deal as well, so that gives the Leafs a little more flexibility now and down the road.
all right, your number 4. Go ahead.
So my number 4, I'm gonna bring up Josh Manson. His name has been linked to the Leafs so much. It's kind of surprising. And the only reason is because he does have a no trade list, and there's word that the Leafs are on that no trade list.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're Manson, you need to decide. Anaheim's not really ready to compete for Cup this year. He's a free agent. He might not even end up getting that chance.
Right.
So he has to kind of decide, does he I think he would consider waiving it if he's going to a contender like the Leafs. And I just like what he brings because his type of style, it plays to playoff hockey. And the Leafs we see they don't have a lot of those guys that can play playoff hockey. You saw what happened against Calgary. Josh Manson would help offset some of that. He's not going to be able to do it alone, but he can provide some of that. And he's got the playoff experience too. He's got, he's a UFA, so you have to kind of keep that in mind with what you're going to give up from him. And maybe he's a cheaper option that the Leafs can look at.
All right, number 3. Go ahead.
Number 3, you know, when I look at what the Leafs need, everyone talks about defense, defense, defense. I wonder if they're going to go for a forward, but we heard Kyle Dubas say that it might be just one bullet in the chamber. So I'm going to stick with defense, and I'm going to go with Scott Mayfield.
Mm.
Kind of teased him yesterday. Do I think he is the top on the market? No, but I still think he's, a cheap, reliable defenseman. Working with a Jake Muzzin, I think that could be a pairing that works well. Maybe this is where you can do the flip for Justin Hall to make this, the Leafs save a little bit of cap space, and you might have to you'll definitely have to throw a sweetener because Mayfield is making less than Justin Hall, but I think he'll help to save the Leafs some money on the cap, and I think he's a pretty good defensive partner that would work with Jake Muzzin.
And are we at number 1? No, number 2.
We're at number 2.
Number 2. Your number 2 player on your board.
Number 2 player on my board. I'm going to go with John Klingberg because here's the thing. The Leafs definitely can use defensive help, but I also think that if you can add a guy that has that puck moving ability, that can really help the Leafs punch a little bit more offensively at 5-on-5, because I'm looking at Jake Muzzin and Justin Hall. That group just doesn't scream offensive punch. Like,
No.
I think you need some of that. You need some of that balance, and I think he's a guy that can thrive. Second pairing. He's been there before with the Dallas Stars. He got them helped them get to a Cup final. I know Miro Heiskanen had a little bit to do with that as well.
A
little bit, but I think he's if you're looking at a guy that fits the Leafs mold a little bit more, it might actually be John Klingberg.
And the number 1 player, before I get to my list on Dave's trade rankings, who would you like to see the Leafs bring in?
All right, I'm finishing off the all defensive ranking here with Jacob Chikrin. This isn't an expensive one. This ain't gonna be cheap, but I think he's the guy that has the most upside out of anyone that you can trade for. I still think Arizona would be a bit of a fool to trade Jacob Chikrin because of his age and future. But I think if you're the Leafs, you got to think long term. Do you have that guy behind Riley? Is it Rasmus Sandin? They're still not sure. I think you go with the guy that's a little more proven. You know what he's going to cost you down the road. And I think it's going to be an expensive one. I think there's going to be a lot of teams on board with looking for it. And I think this is the type of guy I think the Leafs really want to target. And I think he would fit the Leafs really well now and down the road to keep this window open.
He would be. He's an interesting player. I don't have him on my list, and I think it's just because I don't think the Leafs can compete with the other offers that are going to be out there. Yeah, I think you look at him, they're going to want a first-round pick plus an A prospect, probably plus either a couple prospects or a couple young roster players. I don't see the Leafs really having – I don't think they have the ammo to go out and get a Jacob Chikrin, in my opinion. He's a guy who's on a very cost certainty type of deal, and he's got, 3 more years left on that contract, I think. And tell you in 3 years left on that deal. I don't think I don't see it happening, but I hope I am surprised. I do hope that I am surprised, because that'd be a hell of a pick. If the salary cap didn't exist, he would be a lot higher on my list, that's for sure. All right, getting to my list here of my top 5 trade deadline acquisition wish list. I'm actually going to start off with a bit of a bonus pick, because this one is – this can't be it if this is what it is, but Luke Schenn. I think Luke Schenn is somebody who I want to toss his name out there for the Maple Leafs. Someone who's a little bit nasty, physical. He obviously has a past here, but if he could come back and just be a 6 or a 7 on this blue line, I think you're happy. A guy who can kill penalties. He's having somewhat of a resurgence out in Vancouver too. Played pretty well over the weekend too against Toronto. So Luke Shen would be a decent one, and he's under contract next season at like $850K. So, super cheap for somebody. And considering this team needs stuff like that, I think that Shen could be a possibility. Plus, back-to-back Stanley Cups, bud. He's got 2 cups. So bring in a winning pedigree back to Toronto. So that's kind of my bonus pick. And I say it's a bonus because the rest are more so the top 4 defensive type of situations, like that hole that needs to be filled. Luke Shen, somebody where it's more of, like I said, either a bottom pair or an extra defenseman, because I think you're going to need, 8, 9D if you're going to make a long run, like kind of like in the vein of when they picked up Ben Hutton last year at the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at number 5 for myself, you might be a little weary about this one, and it could raise some eyebrows. Jeff Petrie. Jeff Petrie. I know, but listen, if you can get this guy at a reduced salary, so either get them to retain 50% of Petrie's cap hit, or if you can find another club like in Arizona to kind of take off 50% of the 50%, and then you're only sitting there with a $1.56 million cap hit for the next couple of seasons. What I saw last year, Jeff Petrie was a top pair defenseman a year ago. He was arguably, next to Darnell Nurse, the best defenseman in the Canadian division. I doubt he's fallen off a cliff that fast. I think it's just kind of the season in Montreal. It's just not going well for him. A change of scenery. But if he goes elsewhere, I think that he's the type of, two-way defender who has that puck-moving ability as well that could help bolster some 5-on-5 scoring from the back end. I like Jeff Petrie a lot, and certainly not at his regular cap hit. But if you can get that reduced, I think that's a decent option that the Maple Leafs might be able to take advantage of a player who's not playing well, and Montreal definitely looking to offload that contract and may even get something to do it. So Jeff Petrie is kind of an interesting one, but that's who I have at number 5. Number 4, Connor Murphy of the Chicago Blackhawks did sign an extension in the offseason, 4 years at $4.4 million. But he's a right shot defenseman who, is not afraid to get physical, hits a lot, blocks a lot, can kill penalties, eats minutes, playing like 23, 24 minutes a night out in Chicago. So I think you pair him up with Jake Muzzin, I believe that'd be a pretty solid duo there. So I got Connor Murphy coming in at number 4. Number 3, John Klingberg. John Klingberg, unrestricted free agent, coming out of Dallas. A lot of the same reasons that you talked about, but that I also echo with Jeff Petrie. You bring in a guy who's got some size, someone who's made a cup final run before, has a little bit of playoff success, and he's just a really good player. A real solid player who can bring some offense from the back end and also isn't, a massive liability defensively either. Number 2, Scott Mayfield of the New York Islanders. So I'm also high on Mayfield. We both had him at number 2 on our list. He's got another year after this at $1.25 million. Another player who's very defensively sound on the island. And he's somebody who's been playing alongside Adam Pelech as their shutdown pair. So you bring him over. He's got a cheap contract for this year and next. He can play top 4 minutes. He's been doing that the last couple of seasons on the island. So I like Scott Mayfield as a cheaper option. I don't know what it would cost to bring in a guy like that if they'd be interested in moving on from Scott Mayfield, but I do have him as my number 2. And then my number 1 player would be Josh Manson. Got that nastiness, 6'4", 215 pounds, just a big dude who likes to just go and hit anything that he sees. The problem is, and like you said, there are rumblings that he may have Toronto on a non-trade list. There has been rumblings that there's a lot of worries coming from the Canadian teams about how Americans or some players just don't want to get traded to Canada because of all the restrictions, the COVID restrictions up here. I wonder if Josh Manson is one of those guys who does not want to come up here. So he's American, is he not? Like, as is, I'm pretty sure he's an American-born player. And yeah, you can look that up for me really quickly, but I'm pretty sure he is. But
he's from Illinois.
Yeah, exactly. So American-born player with a limited and no trade. may want to stick around and try and make a playoff run with Anaheim, or just might not want to come to Canada. And there's a few guys here who, may also decide not to exercise their trade, their no trade clauses to try and nix any trade that they could be going to Canada. It just is what it is. And Chris Johnson was on Overdrive and he was talking about that. And he said MLSE, he gets the sense, has a little bit of worry about players not wanting to come to Toronto, not only for the trade deadline, but I wonder, this one part wasn't him, but I wonder if they're worried if that leaks into the offseason in terms of free agents. I don't know. We'll see. But Josh Manson would be my number one if they could get it done. I think that he'd be a perfect fit. You got two like twin towers and Jake Muzzin and Josh Manson out there as the shutdown second line for the Maple Leafs. I think that'd be real quality D pairings. You can kind of either kick down Justin Hall to the third pair. Maybe he's included in that deal, and then Liljegren's your third pair. Maybe you go out and you still get Luke Schenn, and he's your third pair type of guy. But I think at the end of the day, we're both in the agreement that a top four defenseman must be added by March 21st here for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and like when I look at what has not gone right for the Leafs, they've had some trouble scoring the playoffs, but guys have stepped up for them. I don't think that's the biggest issue. I still think it's the defense because we see how it's gone against clubs that are playoff bound. And you need those guys on the back end that can up their game up. And I'm sorry, Travis Dermott, he's not doing it for me. If they get an injury to any of their top four guys, that would be a huge problem. So that's another reason why I think top four defensemen, because it slides other guys down and it keeps you in a better spot if injuries were to happen. Because guess what? Injuries are likely to happen in physical brand of playoff hockey.
Yeah, like I said, the Lightning went through 9 defensemen in both of their back-to-back cup years. So you got to be 9 guys deep. How do you feel about Christian Rubens in the Stanley Cup final? Yeah. I don't think you feel too great about it. Alex Biega, you probably don't feel too great about it. So if you go out there, you get a solid top 4, you get another depth defenseman, such as a Luke Schenn or maybe even another Ben Hutton type of player, then you feel a little bit more comfortable with your depth along the blue line there. All right, let's take one more quick break. When we get back, play some Cosine, no sign. But before we do, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors, and that's betonline.net. Football might be over for the season, but basketball and hockey in full steam for both the pro and college sports. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to your Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Also going to tell you about one of today's other show sponsors, and that's rockauto.com. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from your chain store or a car dealership? You can use rockauto.com. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right locked on in their How'd You Hear About Us box set to know that we sent you. Reliably, amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts a car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Welcoming y'all back into the Locked On Leafs podcast for the final lap around the track here for today's Wednesday edition of Locked On Leafs. Got a game tomorrow between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Really quickly, Dave, who do you think should start in that game? Jack Campbell or Peter Mrazek?
You know what? I think Jack Campbell earned himself the back-to-back starts. I think, there was the little if wondering, we want to get both Mrazek and Campbell going. I think you let Jack Campbell build off a really good performance against Seattle. Give him a little redemption against Pittsburgh because we know what happened earlier in the
Ooh,
season.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think you go with Campbell, and then maybe Mrazek has a scheduled start coming up, but there's still going to be plenty of games to get Mrazek in.
Well, we'll have tons of time to preview that and tee that up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Leafs. So make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, audio form, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, you can check us out on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. And now for the patented awkward wave, Dave. The awkward wave for our YouTube folks. How are you? Hey, how you doing? But let's get to it. Let's get to the fun stuff here instead of our nonsense awkward waves. Let's play some cosine, no sign. If you're new to the podcast, you're not sure how this game works. I'm going to make a statement. Dave's going to make a statement. If we agree with it, we're going to cosine the statement. If we disagree, we're going to no sign this statement. So let's run through this pretty darn quickly. I will go first here, Dave. Mitch Marner's assist the other night is a top 3 play we've seen this season.
I'm going to have to no sign it because Trevor Zegras alone has 3 top plays, in my opinion, with the Michigan stuff. Mitch Marner's assist, I think it's a top 10. I'm just not sure it's a top 3. So, unfortunately, Mitch, I'm going to have to no sign this one.
You mentioned Connor McDavid just cakewalking through defensemen all year.
Yeah, there's plenty to honestly. There's plenty to go around. I just think Trevor Zegras has done.
Is it the second best assist?
Yeah, I'll go that. I'll go there.
Right.
Trevor Zegras was number 1. Mitch Marner will go number 2.
All right. Your first one. Go.
So my first one, I'll make this one a Leafs one as well. Travis Dermott is with the team past the trade deadline.
Oh man. I'm gonna no sign it. I don't think so. I think they're gonna have to send some money out somehow. And I think you send out, what's he making, about 1.5 million, I think, this year and next. So you're getting rid of, some extra cap next season as well. The problem is he is somebody who you don't love to have him on your blue line in the playoffs, but you could trust him as your 7th, I suppose. The question is, he will be with the team?
Yeah. Will he stick around?
I'm going to no sign it. I think he's going to get dealt. I think if they bring in another defenseman, he may be the guy who that team might be willing to kind of take a flyer on for the rest of the year, knowing that he's got one more season left. Maybe just a change of scenery could blossom him into a better everyday NHLer, maybe a number 5 they could be hoping for. So I'm going to say that he gets included in whatever deal gets made for some sort of defenseman. And Kyle Dubas has actually been really good with this, where when players aren't given their fair shake, he has given them opportunities elsewhere. You think Josh Levo, Alex Barabanov, Mikko Lehtinen, like he's done this multiple times over the last few seasons, and maybe Dermott's another one of those guys where come the deadline, if they get even more depth on the blue line and he falls down the chart a little bit, they'd be willing to move on from him and give him somewhere else if he can try and get an everyday spot in the lineup. Okay, number 2 for you. Sheldon Keefe deserves Jack Adams consideration.
Consideration, I'm going to co-sign that.
Like, if you were to write your ballot right now, would he be on your ballot as your top 3 candidates?
You know what? I will get. Yeah, I think so. It's for me. It's like it's him. I mean, you look at what is going on in Florida right now. Like, they had to basically change their coaches during the year. They had to deal with keep the standard of play up. I mean, usually it's good when you're able to bring in, a guy that's in the room. So I think Andrew Brunette deserves some consideration there. And if I had to pick a third from my ballot, so we got Keefe, we got Brunette. I I'm gonna go Pete DeBoer as my third because this is a guy who's had his team has been through so many injuries, hasn't even had a superstar player in the lineup,
Yeah.
and yet they're the number 2 team in the West.
Yeah, I think you're wrong. By the way, the only answer is unfortunately at this very moment, I think is a no sign. If you talk about a team that's done more with less and has overcome a ridiculous amount of adversity, you can't go further than the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Fair.
Right? So I think Mike Sullivan to me is up there at the top as of now. It's kind of his award to lose at the moment. They're leading the Metro. They didn't have Malkin for most of the season. Crosby was dealing with some COVID and some injuries earlier in the year. They had injuries to Rust, injuries to Gensel, injuries to Letang. Their goalies kind of come out of nowhere to become an all-star, all-pro level goaltender in Tristan Jarry, and they've got that team gelling. Guys like Evan Rodriguez having career years, Mike Matheson having a resurgence down there in Pittsburgh. So I think Mike Sullivan at this point is probably at the top of my ballot right now, I would say. Then I think you don't even get there. I think Daryl Sutter deserves a lot of love for the turnaround in Calgary. I think that he's somebody who could definitely be at the top of the ballot or up there close to it. And then you get to your Andrew Brunettes and maybe even Dean Evanson out in Minnesota, who's expecting for them to be as good as they've been this season. Rod the Bod, Brindamore, is he going to get some love here at some point? So I think there's a few guys who right now I have over Sheldon Keefe, but if they win the division, then I think in the conference especially, then I believe Keefe will be a lot more into consideration here for the Jack Adams, but as of now, not quite there for me. Not quite yet. Still got some stuff to prove.
That's fair.
Your next one.
All right, my next one is a non-Leaf one. Jack Eichel scores in his Vegas Golden Knights debut against the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, Cosine. Let's go. That is the game of the night tonight. There's no Maple Leafs on, so I think everyone's going to be tuned into that Vegas Colorado game. You got Jack Eichel making his Vegas debut in Vegas, obviously against the Colorado Avalanche, one of the best teams in the NHL. These are the two best teams in the West, in my opinion. So this is going to be a fantastic game. And yeah, I think the adrenaline running through his veins is going to lead to him popping one into the back of the net. Cosine, Dave. Cosine.
I can't wait. If he does do it, that Vegas crowd is going to go berserk.
It's going to pop. You're going to hear a pop. It'll be reminiscent to Edge at the Rumble a couple of years ago.
That was a pretty good pop.
It would be Edge at the Rumble a couple of years ago. My fellow Marks would know exactly what I'm talking about. Those who don't care about wrestling probably don't understand that. But let's say Matthew's 4-goal performance, I suppose, could be it to link it back to the Maple Leafs. But all right, my third one for you, Dave. And this one is also not going to be Leafs related. The Montreal Canadiens are going into full rebuild mode, including Carey Price.
I'm going to sign this one.
No way. You're going to co-sign.
The reason why I'm going to sign this one is because I think Carey Price needs, I think for himself, I think for him, I think he needs to move on from this organization because I don't know if he wants to go through. I know he's signed long-term. First off, Montreal's committed to the rebuild. Can you commit to rebuild with Carey Price as your goaltender? For this year, it's fine because he's not playing. But if you're I don't think he wants to go through it. I thought they were close to moving him last year, and it didn't happen. But I think there's a better chance just based on I think where he's at in his point of his career mentally, how this year has gone. I think it's good. If Montreal is really invested in the rebuild, then they got to think of, cutting off, starting a new era a little bit there.
Who are the untouchables there, you think? I don't think it's a very long list at this point.
No. Like you're thinking of the young guys like Nick Suzuki. You're thinking,
Cole Caulfield, and that might be it.
yeah, like maybe Romanov if you think that's a guy that's you can build the blue line around. Other than that, I think everybody else should be open season.
Yeah, and I think they will be. I think it's going to be, full on yard sale, either at the deadline in March or potentially this summer, which would be more of a Carey Price type of move. But yeah, they're definitely going to be a team to watch here come the deadline. You got one more for me, right?
Got one more. It's Leafs base, but it's got some Penguins fever to it.
Okay.
And we'll preview the game, but there's a guy who's sitting at 499 goals.
See, here's the problem, Dave. I'll tell you the problem with your question.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So we're recording this on Tuesday. It is being released on Wednesday. He plays tonight in Philadelphia and could score his 500th goal tonight before the game tomorrow.
Okay, how about this? I won't ask this one for that reason. I always have to remember because I think there's a good chance he scores against Philadelphia because it's Philadelphia. So I will go with the new one here. You know what? I'm gonna go with just the Leafs Penguins one. I think the Leafs blow out the Penguins. You can't in their next game. First game back with fans, more fans in the stands.
Yeah. Keep talking.
Right.
Okay.
I think the Penguins. They've been on a roll, and I think the Leafs play up to a team that's better. Last time, I think they underestimated them. They were, that was a team that had so many COVID.
It was embarrassing. Just
it was embarrassing.
They lost to the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins.
Yeah. So I think this is a prove-it game for the Leafs. I think, they're back at home. They've had a couple days to kind of get themselves ready for this game. I think the buzz from the crowd, even though it's at 50%, I still think that 50% will mean something to this team. So I think
I'm still going to no-sign it. I don't think they're going to blow them out. I got to no-sign it. They could win the game. It could be emotionally charged. It could be a good game, a close game. I don't think it'll be a blowout, though. Like 6-1, 7-2 type of game. I just don't see it. Especially you look at the way that team is playing. I mean, they're the top team in the Metro for a reason, right? They're not the Seattle Kraken. They're a really, really good team. They're not the Montreal Canadiens. They are a really strong, solid team. So I don't think that it's going to be a blowout at all. I think it'll be a close, tight game. I am going to be curious to see who's in net, though. If they go back to Jack Campbell, if they decide to go to Peter Mrazek, that to me is kind of the big question ahead of the game. But then once you get to it, I'm just excited to see what happens. It's interesting. I was talking with Jamie McLennan today from Overdrive, and he brought to my attention because I was asking him if he felt that the game against Seattle, was that, a good game to kind of build confidence if you're Jack Campbell. And he said, well, it's interesting because you look at his only two good games he's had in the last 2 months. There's pretty much only two that he's had good ones, right? The game that he had when he had that response right before the All-Star break against New Jersey, and then last night against Seattle were probably his two best games in the last 2 months. They're both against basement dweller crappy teams. So do you give them the opportunity to see what he looks like against the quality team against Pittsburgh and see if that's a real, I don't want to call it a confidence check. I guess you could call it like a heat check. It's a bit of a heat check. Steph Curry has hit 3 or 4 threes in a row, and then he pulls up from 30 feet out. It's a heat check. I think that might be the situation they roll with Jack Campbell. See if he can build off of the win against Seattle. But if it doesn't go well, then that conversation sparks up. He doesn't perform against top-tier teams. He's only performing against non-playoff teams, and that's where you start to get concerned, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I also just think that, when I look at the way that they played in front of Jack Campbell at times, especially against those top teams, they had like not looked good. So I think if, let's say, the Leafs play well, but Jack Campbell just shoots the bed, like,
Well, like what happened in Calgary,
yeah,
right? The team played well. Jack Campbell didn't.
yeah. So like that's so that like I need we that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most is Jack Campbell, what he did against Seattle, just based off of, all right, I really didn't play well last time. I got to step up my game. Or, yeah, like you said, was this Seattle was just a very not good team, and I was able to kind of just bounce back. So that's probably the number one thing I'm looking forward to in this game. I think Pittsburgh is a perfect test for that because, as I said, this is a team that I think he has something to prove against them after what happened not too
Yeah.
long ago.
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right. And I hope, I do hope that we get to see, I do hope we get to see him. I hope they roll back to him. I'm just not sure if Sheldon Keefe does that just because he seems to be going, one start to this guy, next start to this guy. They're alternating starts at this point as opposed to letting somebody, get a bulk of starts here. So it'll be interesting. But that hopefully is an answer that we will have for you on tomorrow's show, on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Leafs, as we will be previewing the game, Leafs and Pens in Toronto. 50% capacity. So will they be able to perform in front of a energy charged crowd? Well, we'll see, Dave. We will see. That's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morisuti. And follow the show at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow, teeing up the game between Toronto and Pittsburgh. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.